Welcome to the Dog Geek Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley, the Dog Geek. And today I am really excited to discuss and talk about our dog's emotions. So, as I've been getting deeper into my training career, I guess, my training journey and learning about dogs, I have been fascinated more about how dogs see the world, how their brains work and respond to situations. And a lot of that has to do with their emotional response to things. Why are they responding that way? What's really going on? And I think that there's a lot of anthropomorphizing happening with people to their dogs. So we put a lot of our human emotions on our dogs in a lot of different situations. And sometimes we either expect too much of our dogs from an emotional place, or we blame them for doing things, feeling a certain way. And the problem with some of that is that it's not helpful because it's the wrong perspective to have. So, I want to talk a little bit about the emotions um, that your dogs do have, don't have, and how you can help recognize what these emotions are and then what to do in those scenarios. So, let's keep it simple and easy with what emotions our dogs do have. So, we know that dogs feel joy, all right, happiness, they can be happy. We know that they feel excitement. We know that they feel sadness, fear, anxiety, aggression. Um, those are kind of some base emotions, which again, we feel them as well. Kids feel them. But then we run into this other category of emotions they don't feel, which we kind of put onto them because we feel them. And this would be things like shame, guilt, remorse, resentment, bitterness, and spitefulness. So, those emotions our dogs are not feeling. So, when you come home and your dog, got into the trash and then you yell at and they were, they got into the trash, they made a mess in the kitchen and they when you got home found the mess, but your dog was sitting, sleeping on their dog bed and you come in and of course you're upset, right? Anybody would be. Now there's this big mess. You just had a day of work or you were just running out doing something and the last thing you wanted to do was come home and clean up a bunch of trash on the kitchen floor. So yeah, we get upset and we maybe raise our voice. We maybe start to blame our dogs and start, reprimanding them. How dare you, bad dog? What did you do? And then when we look at our dog's response, people are saying, "Oh, my dog feels guilty." Their ears go back. They kind of maybe cower away. Um, they start to maybe cower away or uh, tail tucks between the legs and they get really small and we go, "Oh, my dog feels so guilty for what they had done." And the fact is that is an emotion that our dogs do not possess. So what's happening here, right? So if they don't feel guilt, what's happening? Well, basically our dogs are responding to your emotional state. They're not responding to the fact that there's trash on the floor. They're responding to when you came in the door, you became very scary. You raised your voice. Maybe you're, slamming things, you're stomping your feet, you're pointing and yelling at the dog. And so your dog is showing fear of you for the way that you are reacting. Um, I also think it's really important to kind of know that even though our dogs possess a lot of emotions that we do, their emotions are much more simple. And with dog training, sometimes it can be that simple. We just have to bring it down. It is not complicated. They don't have all of this, resentment. Oh, my dog is doing this because I left the house. Oh, my dog is mad at me because it went to the groomer, we got home and it hid under the bed. My dog's, having resentment and is mad at me. My dog is being spiteful because I didn't take them for a walk, so they destroyed and started chewing up my couch. Those things are not what's happening. So they're too complex, those types of brain processes. Our dogs are processing things at a much simpler level, and they're always living in the moment. Um, so when your dog pulled the garbage out and chewed that up and then went to lie down, any m- um, moment for you to correct that behavior or try to interrupt it, try to redirect it, it's anything like that, the opportunity was completely lost. When we're talking about training, we're usually talking about things that are happening in the span of a couple seconds. So when training, it's, what happened, right? What your dog's response was, and then what's the consequence. And those things are happening in very quick repetition. So that's why training is usually, we have to be pretty quick. So, when you think something happened and we didn't catch it until a minute later, you've missed an opportunity to do anything, whether that was to reward the behavior or discourage the behavior or redirect the behavior. You have to do it within a span of a couple seconds for our dogs to correlate those that scenario. Okay. Um, the other thing to remember when we talk about dogs' emotions and how they're responding to you or other dogs or other people is that your dog is never going to lie to you. They cannot lie. So your dog is only acting the way they feel. It's pure emotion and it's pure truth. And our job is to understand their emotion and then help them in whatever the way that might be, whether it's help build confidence because maybe they're a little standoffish, whether it's helping them feel safe and secure, whether it is, my dog is really fearful at the moment and I need to give them space and back them away from a situation that would help make them feel more secure. If they're overexcited, maybe that's I need to kind of calm down the situation because my dog is over aroused. So know that they're living in the moment, moment to moment, and they cannot lie to you how they feel about things. Um, so I want to talk about kind of this cycle of emotional state. And because I think it's really important when we have our dogs that, at home, oh, why and my dog was doing something perfect at home. They come when I call, they sit. A lot of people will say, but they know this behavior, they know what this means. And then when, the situation is elevated, whether that's out in the store, at the vet's office, um, out on a walk where, something got your dog really excited or anxious, and then you were trying to use that same cue, maybe it's sit, maybe it's, to walk loose on that leash, maybe it's a heel, and our dogs can't focus. And people go, I don't understand. My dog does know this cue. They know it. We've done it at home a bazillion times. I don't understand why they're not doing it. There's because emotions will increase or decrease based on the environment. And it's very similar to human emotion in the fact that they are just responding and the emotions can be elevated. Um, and we always want to keep our dogs to the best of our ability in a calmer state or a controlled emotional state. So let's talk about this a little bit. Okay. So when your dog is relaxed at home, lying in bed or something like that, we would call that just a comfortable state or maybe neutral. Nothing's really happening. They're just calm, relaxed, napping, sleeping, strolling around the house. Sometimes they'll just kind of stroll. So this is your neutral environment, okay? So, let's let's say then you go ahead and grab the leash. Now, our dog has interest. They become interested. They perk up, right? Whoa, ooh, what are we doing here? We grab the leash. What's happening next? Then our dog increases. They come running to you, and the emotional state is increasing to maybe joy, happiness, right? Now they're like, oh, we're going for a walk. And you can see it go from just curiosity, interest to, "Oh, I know what this is," and now we're excited. So, a happy and a joyful dog is a good state to be in. Where we have a lot of self dog self-control issues is when that joyful state jumps into excitement. So when they get really excited, all right, then the emotional state is rising to a point where they're having a lack of self-control. And it's nice to see our dogs so happy and excited. However, the the concern here is that if that excitement level rises too high, then we've redlined. They've gone over what's called a threshold, over threshold, an emotional threshold where they cannot think, they cannot react, they cannot respond. And this is where we have, that dog where we say, well, ugh, they're not listening. They're not doing what I've asked because we have put them over that emotional threshold. So the goal is to keep them below that red line. And if they are below that red line, which is that threshold of learning, that threshold of focus, self control, then we can work. They can learn. We can bring down the excitement just to happiness. We can, and they can actually do things and they'll be in a better state. When we get past a red line, everything is elevated in their body, just like people. It's all over elevated. And it's not a good place for them to be. So, we always need to bring them down. When on the other side of the spectrum, okay, we have a dog that's feeling, again, in neutral, very comfortable, and maybe you do something like grab the car keys. All right. Not all dogs like to go for a car ride. So, in this instance, this dog, let's say, does not like the car ride. So, you pick up the keys and your dog is a little cautious. They might be curious, but they're a little more cautious. So this is different from interest because as opposed to maybe coming up to you and approaching you like, "What you doing?" They are more cautious, keeping their distance. Maybe the tail is not wagging or the ears are a little bit back. They're a little bit moving backwards away from you. If your dog is ever moving away from you or another dog or an object, that's a fear response and they are creating comfortable distance for themselves. And that needs to be on our part respected. We need to understand what that means. That doesn't mean I grab my dog by their collar, drag them towards me or towards that item or towards that person, and try to force them to understand the situation because that's not going to help. So we have the car keys. Our dog is cautious because they don't like going in the car. Then maybe they become more suspicious. Now you have your car keys on, you have their collar, their leash. Maybe you've clipped them up and taken them outside. So maybe they're a little cautious, suspicious because they think, well, maybe we're going for a walk, but she has her car keys. So maybe I'm going in the car. I'm not really sure. So we have a lot of suspicion happening. And again, you're going to see that this body language may be conflicted. Uh, again, this is more of a standoffish response. So they are not going to look happy and joyful. They're going to look concerned. So from there, maybe we open the door and we get them in the car. So now, if your dog's afraid of cars, we've put them in the car and now they're anxious. So this is that point of we're just about over threshold because you can see that these triggers are building and it's built from being cautious to being suspicious. We're almost there. I think we might be doing this thing, but I'm not 100% sure. And then you put them in the car and now they're anxious and now they're having those anxiety symptoms. We might be getting drooling, we might be getting barking, we might be getting shaking. Some dogs will vomit. Usually, I don't think that would be the second they're in the car, but driving, they might get car sick. So they're maybe anticipating that vomit starting to kind of happen. They're not anticipating, we are anticipating, but they might start to feel nauseous just by being placed in the car. So then you turn the car on and you start driving. Now they could be over threshold. So now we are um, totally fearful. And this is where we'll get that other body responses of maybe vomiting, diarrhea, total shutdown. And that's again to a point we don't want them to be at and to where nothing we're going to be able to do. is going to soothe or calm them in that scenario or in that state. The only thing to do in that instance is to get them out. Get them out of that environment, get them out of that car. And if with fear responses that get very intense, where we're talking about anxiety and full blown fear, to that over red line state, requires positive reinforcement training, that requires slow progression of changing the neuro pathways in our dog's brain from fear to joy. So that is a slow process. And it's the same for people. If you're afraid of flying, you can't just shove somebody on a plane and say, deal with it. Doesn't work. You need to typically it's a slow exposure, and you talk to a therapist and you have to work through those emotional states and change how your brain perceives this fearful thing of the airplane. And our dogs, it's very similar. You can't throw them into these fearful situations and say, ah, you're good. Oh, you know this. We're just going to do this. It's no big deal. We have to listen to what they're saying. They are living in the moment. They are showing you pure emotion that they feel. They cannot hide it. They are showing it to you. So we need to go, okay, what are you feeling? What do I need to do about it to bring you under threshold so that you can think, you can focus, and you can learn? All of that is really, really important. And I think for understanding dogs and how they learn, it's really been um, important for me and a turning point for me that dog training is not, for me, it's not about obedience and the perfect heel and the having my dog stay while I walk away in the middle of a crowded space and my dog not moving. For me, those things are not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in my dog learning life skills, being able to cope, being able to have choice. These are living, breathing things, and they do have choices and they do have likes and dislikes. Some dogs want to play with other dogs, some dogs don't. Studies have shown that dogs have a stronger attachment to people than they do to other dogs. And that's just because of the evolution of how we co-evolved with dogs. And dogs do prefer to be with people. They create stronger bonds with their people, as long as that is based on trust, understanding, security, safety. Your dogs want to feel safe. And when we're using aversive training methods or raising our voices and being scary, you are not creating trust in that relationship. We're not creating safety. We're not creating a secured environment. And that is a problem. So understand that part of living with our dogs and owning our dogs is understanding how they're feeling and you responding or preventing, right? If we know there's a recurring problem, then it's us pre pre-planning, pre-gaming to that dog's response of something. So if it's going to be on a walk and we know that there's a dog that's behind a certain fence that tends to always be out, that charges and barks at our dog is going to respond to that. Okay. They're responding to what's happening, to that stimulus, to that dog charging. It's very difficult for your dog to just go, ugh, no big deal, right? It's almost like if you're standing in the middle of a store and some dude runs up to you or girl runs up to you and starts yelling at you, are you just going to stand there and go, "Mm, I don't care"? No, you're probably going to feel frightened. You're going to feel anxious. You're going to have this kind of jolt for a fight or a flight response, right? You're not just going to be cool, calm, and collected like it's no big deal. Even if that person was, on the other side of the fence. Okay, if it's a neighbor and they come up to the other side of the fence and they start yelling at you and freaking out and because you did this and how dare you, your kid keeps throwing their ball, keeps getting into my yard and they're freaking out. You would not be able to just sit back and go, "Hmm, no biggie," and walk away. We would have an emotional response based off of what their emotional response is. And our dogs are the same way. So our dogs are always responding off of other dogs' emotions and other people's emotions. So in that scenario, I know where that dog is. I know where that yard is. I am not going to try to force my dog to walk past that yard and walk past that yard. I'm going to either cross the street, I'm going to pick a different path to go, and then so I'm setting my dog up for success. Trying to get our dogs to stay calm in that environment when another dog is charging the fence and we're walking on that sidewalk is an unrealistic expectation. It is not something that they are going to be able to do. And when knowing that, we can preemptively move to the other side of the street before we get to that yard. We can turn around and go back. We can take a different path on our walk. And those things are going to be more beneficial for your dog's emotional state. Um, so, all of this, knowing what our dogs are feeling, knowing what they don't feel, and being able to respond to their emotional states is going to help keep them out of that red zone, out of going over threshold. And when we do that, lowers the stress in our dog's system. And that's going to make for a healthier and a happier dog. So listen to your dogs. They will not lie to you. And if you have any concerns about anything, I highly encourage you to look for a positive reinforcement trainer that can help you with these. Remember that aversive punishments will not change your dog's emotional state from fear to happiness. It will only instill more fear. Two fears don't make a happy outcome. All right. Thanks so much for listening to the Dog Geek Podcast.